At my mother-in-law's birthday dinner in Rome, my seat was missing. My husband chuckled. Oops, guess we miscounted. As the family laughed, I calmly said, seems I'm not family, and walked out. 30 minutes later, they discovered I'd cancelled the entire event. Venue, catering, everything. Their faces turned ghostly white. Seems I'm not family, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The words hung in the air of that exclusive Roman restaurant as 12 pairs of eyes stared back at me with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed satisfaction. My husband Sean's light chuckle as he'd said, oops, guess we miscounted, still echoed in my ears as I turned and walked away from the table where there was no chair for me. The humiliation burned through my veins as I exited the restaurant, but not a single tear fell. Instead, I felt an eerie calm take over as I pulled out my phone and opened the event management app I'd built my career on. I had 30 minutes before they'd realize what I was doing, and that was more than enough time. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. Sometimes the most powerful moments come when we finally recognize our worth. If you've ever felt like an outsider looking in, this story might resonate with you. Before we witness Anna's journey from Boston's premier event planner to a woman reclaiming her dignity in Rome, hit subscribe to join our community of readers who appreciate stories of self-discovery and unexpected strength. Now, let's step behind the curtain of a marriage built on appearances. My name is Anna Morgan Caldwell. 5 years ago, I was just Anna Morgan, the founder of Elite Affairs, Boston's most sought-after event planning company. I'd built my business from the ground up after putting myself through business school. Every elegant gala, every perfectly executed corporate gathering, every society wedding in Boston had my invisible fingerprints all over it. My reputation for discretion, attention to detail, and ability to pull off the impossible had made me the go-to planner for the city's elite. That's how I met Sean Caldwell at the charity gala I organized for the Boston Children's Hospital. Tall, with perfectly coiffed dark hair and a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, Sean had the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about money. He was charming in that practiced way of men born into privilege, but there was something genuine in his interest in my work. So you're the wizard behind all this? He'd asked, gesturing to the transformed ballroom of the Four Seasons. My mother has been trying to figure out who to hire for her charity function next month. I think I just found her answer. One job led to another, and soon I was regularly planning events for the Caldwell family. The Caldwells were Boston aristocracy with old money that traced back to shipping and railroads. They had that particular brand of wealth that didn't need to show off. It was evident in the subtle quality of everything they owned, the ease with which they navigated their world. Our romance began 6 months after I started working for his family. Sean pursued me with the same determination he brought to his work at the family's investment firm. There were warning signs, of course. The way his mother, Eleanor, looked at me with barely concealed disapproval when Sean first introduced me as more than his event planner. The casual comments about my humble beginnings. The surprise in people's voices when they discovered I was dating a Caldwell. You've done well for yourself, Eleanor had said during our first dinner together as a couple, her smile not reaching her eyes. Self-made success is so American. I ignored these signs because I was falling in love with Sean. He seemed different from his family, more open-minded, less concerned with lineage and status. When he proposed 11 months after our first date, I said yes despite the nagging feeling that I was entering a world that would never truly accept me. The wedding was, naturally, the social event of the season. I planned much of it myself, unable to trust another planner with my own wedding. Eleanor had opinions about everything. The venue wasn't traditional enough, the menu too adventurous, the guest list missing key society names. I compromised where I could, held firm where it mattered to me. Sean played peacemaker, but I noticed he rarely contradicted his mother directly. After the wedding, the undermining became more systematic. Despite using my company for their events, the Caldwells constantly questioned my decisions, changed plans last minute, and took credit for my ideas. At family gatherings, my opinions were solicited then dismissed. My background in event planning was treated as a charming hobby rather than a successful business. Anna has such a good eye for these things, Eleanor would say to her friends, patting my hand condescendingly. It's almost like having a personal party planner in the family. Sean never defended me. He'd shrug and tell me later that's just how his mother was, that I shouldn't take it personally. But it was personal, and it got worse as the years passed. The opportunity to plan Eleanor's 70th birthday in Rome should have been my crowning achievement. A week-long celebration in the Eternal City, culminating in a dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant overlooking the Colosseum. I threw myself into creating the perfect event, leveraging every contact I had in the industry. It was during this planning that I discovered the first cracks in the Caldwell facade. The deposits for venues were delayed. Vendors called asking about payments. When I mentioned it to Sean, he brushed it off, saying the family accountant was just being cautious with international transfers. But I saw the statements accidentally left open on his laptop. Investments gone bad, properties mortgaged to the hilt, lines of credit maxed out. The Caldwell fortune was dwindling fast. Still, I kept planning, using my own company's credit line to secure deposits when needed. I told myself it was temporary, that Sean would explain everything once the birthday celebration was behind us. Then came the morning of our flight to Rome. Sean was in the shower when his phone pinged with a message. I never checked his phone, I'd always respected his privacy. But something made me look that morning. The message preview from V was clear on his screen. Can't wait to see you in Rome. Have you told her yet? My fingers moved without conscious thought, opening the message thread with Vanessa Hughes, Sean's college girlfriend. The woman his parents had always adored. The woman they had expected him to marry before he met me. The messages went back months. Plans made. A future discussed. And yes, a baby, their baby, due in 4 months. I took screenshots, forwarded them to myself, then deleted the evidence from his phone. I packed my bags, plastered on a smile, and boarded the flight to Rome with my husband and his family. Now, standing outside that restaurant in Rome, I made my choice. I wouldn't confront Sean before the dinner. I would let events unfold. And when they did, I would be ready. Our flight landed at Fiumicino Airport just as the golden Italian sunset painted Rome's skyline. I'd arranged private transportation for the entire Caldwell entourage. Sean's parents Eleanor and Richard, his sister Melissa with her husband Grant, his brother Thomas with his wife Claire, and 2 sets of aunts and uncles. The convoy of sleek black Mercedes vans waiting at the terminal should have impressed them. Instead, Eleanor's first words stepping off the plane were, "I thought I'd specified the hotel cars, Anna. These seem rather generic." I bit my tongue as I had countless times before. The hotel had a scheduling issue. These are actually from Lux Transport. They service most of the diplomats in Rome. My explanation fell on deaf ears as she was already discussing something with Richard, their heads bent together in that conspiratorial way that always excluded me. The Hotel de Russie welcomed us with the 5-star treatment I'd meticulously arranged. Champagne flowed in the private lounge while bellhops whisked away our luggage. I'd spent months securing the perfect accommodations, selecting suites with the best views, arranging welcome baskets filled with Italian delicacies, and planning personalized schedules for each family member. Eleanor barely glanced at her itinerary before setting it aside. "We'll just play it by ear," she said, waving away weeks of careful planning. "The family knows Rome quite well." Our suite was magnificent. A terrace overlooking the Spanish Steps, fresh flowers in every room, and a bottle of Sean's favorite Barolo breathing on the sideboard. But the moment we entered, Sean's phone buzzed and he stepped onto the terrace, speaking in hushed tones. "Work?" I asked when he returned. "Just some investment issues," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Let's get ready for dinner." The welcome dinner I'd planned at a charming trattoria in Trastevere became the first clear sign of my exclusion. Somehow, the seating arrangement shifted just before we arrived, and I found myself at the far end of the table, separated from Sean by his cousin and aunt. Throughout the meal, inside jokes flew across the table, stories of previous family trips to Italy from which I'd been absent. When I attempted to join the conversation about the week's planned activities, Melissa interrupted. "Oh, Anna, we've actually decided to do some family shopping tomorrow instead of the Vatican tour." "Family shopping?" I asked. "You know," Eleanor interjected smoothly, "just some tradition we have. You'd be bored, dear. Why don't you use the time to check on the birthday arrangements? That's your expertise after all." The pattern continued throughout the next few days. I'd wake to find Sean already gone, a hastily scribbled note about meeting his father for breakfast. The family would disappear for hours on impromptu excursions, that somehow everyone knew about except me. Whispered conversations in corners of the hotel lobby abruptly stopped when I approached. Dinner reservations mysteriously changed to accommodate old friends, who happened to be in Rome. Friends who looked at me with barely disguised curiosity, as if assessing how I was handling what was coming. On the third morning, opportunity presented itself when Sean rushed to meet his brother, leaving his briefcase unlocked. The documents inside confirmed my worst fears. Draft separation papers prepared by the Caldwell family attorney, dated 2 months earlier. A proposed settlement offering a pittance compared to what I was entitled to, and most damning, a script, an actual script outlining how Sean would announce our impending divorce at his mother's birthday dinner, presenting it as a mutual decision reached amicably. My hands trembled as I photographed each page with my phone. There it was in black and white, the perfect stage-managed exit of the unsuitable wife, timed for maximum public impact yet minimum social embarrassment for the Caldwells. Eleanor's birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was to be my funeral as a Caldwell. Instead of confronting Sean, I channeled my anger into methodical documentation. Each day I made excuses to return to our suite alone, searching for more evidence. I found bank statements showing massive withdrawals to offshore accounts. Email printouts discussing the liquidation of assets before the situation becomes public. A handwritten note from Eleanor to Sean. Once this unpleasantness with Anna is behind us, Vanessa will be welcomed back properly. My professional mask remained firmly in place as I continued overseeing the birthday preparations. I confirmed floral arrangements, met with the restaurant manager, approved the custom menu cards, all while collecting digital breadcrumbs of the Caldwell's financial house of cards. When anyone asked why I seemed distracted, I blamed last-minute event details. In reality, I was building my arsenal. The morning of Eleanor's birthday dawned bright and clear. I woke early, slipping out of bed without disturbing Sean. The day's schedule was packed: a private morning tour of the Borghese Gallery, lunch at a vineyard outside the city, then returning to the hotel to prepare for the evening's grand dinner. As the event planner, I needed to arrive at the restaurant early to ensure everything was perfect. I was in the hotel's business center, printing final confirmations, when I overheard Eleanor's voice from the adjacent concierge desk. The dividing wall was thin and her imperious tone carried clearly. "There will be 12 seats, not 13, she instructed someone over the phone. "I don't care what the original reservation says. The seating chart I sent is final." Pause. "Then, no, that won't be a problem. The arrangement has been discussed with my son. His wife will not be staying for the dinner. A family matter, you understand. No need for questions when she leaves." My blood turned to ice as the pieces clicked into place. The missing seat wasn't an oversight or last-minute adjustment. It was the centerpiece of their plan. A public humiliation designed to make my exit look like my choice rather than their orchestration. I closed my laptop, gathered my papers, and walked to the elevator with measured steps. Inside, I pulled out my phone and began making a new set of arrangements. If the Caldwells wanted a memorable birthday dinner, I would ensure it was unforgettable. Just not in the way they had planned. I arrived at Aroma Restaurant an hour before the other guests, as any good event planner would. The rooftop venue offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the Colosseum, bathed in the amber glow of sunset. I personally inspected every detail, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the arrangement of Eleanor's favorite white peonies and roses. The champagne was chilling, the 7-course tasting menu confirmed, and the 3-tiered birthday cake was a masterpiece of Italian craftsmanship. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Signora Caldwell?" asked Marco, the maitre d'. "Perfect," I replied, knowing it would be the last event I would plan for the Caldwells. Despite everything, my professional pride demanded nothing less than excellence. I returned to the hotel to change into the midnight blue Valentino gown I'd purchased specifically for tonight. As I applied my makeup with steady hands, I studied my reflection. 5 years of trying to fit into a world that was determined to reject me had taken its toll, but not in the way the Caldwells might have hoped. Instead of breaking me, they had hardened my resolve. The Caldwell family had arranged to meet in the hotel lobby before departing together for the restaurant. I arrived precisely on time to find them all waiting, Eleanor resplendent in vintage Chanel, her diamond necklace catching the light. Sean's eyes widened slightly when he saw me, perhaps remembering what had attracted him to me in the first place. or perhaps calculating how soon he could be free of me. "Anna, darling, you look lovely," Eleanor said, air-kissing near my cheeks. "We're just waiting for the cars." The drive to the restaurant was short, filled with artificial chatter about the day's activities from which I'd been excluded. As we ascended in the elevator to the rooftop, Sean placed his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that once felt intimate but now seemed performative for the benefit of the elevator attendant. The doors opened to reveal the stunning terrace I had designed, transformed into an elegant dining space under the stars. The Colosseum stood illuminated against the night sky, a testament to both grandeur and the inevitable fall of empires. How fitting. Eleanor entered first, greeted with enthusiastic applause from waiting family members. One by one, everyone moved toward the large round table I had specified, a table that should have seated 13. I followed behind Sean, who moved purposefully toward his assigned seat next to his mother. I approached the spot where my place card should have been, only to find nothing. No chair, no place setting, no acknowledgement that I existed. For a moment I stood frozen, the perfect tableau of confusion. Around me, conversations continued as everyone settled into their seats, studiously avoiding my gaze. The wait staff, who had confirmed the seating with me just hours earlier, looked uncomfortable but remained silent. "Is something wrong?" Eleanor asked innocently, her voice carrying just enough to draw everyone's attention. "There seems to be a mistake," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "My place setting is missing." The meticulously choreographed scene unfolded exactly as they had planned. Furrowed brows. Exchanged glances. Sean half rising from his chair, a performance of concern that never reached his eyes. "That's odd," Melissa said, examining the table. "Did someone count wrong?" Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps there was a miscommunication with the restaurant staff. Then came Sean's line, delivered with a practiced casualness that made my skin crawl. He chuckled, and said, "Oops, guess we miscounted." The family laughed, not uproariously, that would be too obvious, but with the gentle amusement of people sharing an inside joke. In that moment I saw it all with perfect clarity. The calculated humiliation, the public setting chosen to prevent a scene, the groundwork for stories they would tell later about poor Anna, who couldn't handle the pressure of Caldwell family life. My gaze moved slowly around the table, taking in each face. Eleanor, triumphant behind her birthday smile. Richard, uncomfortable but complicit. Melissa and Thomas, enjoying the spectacle. Their spouses, aware enough of the cruelty to look slightly ashamed but not enough to object. And Sean, my husband, the man who had once promised to stand by me against the world, watching me with detached curiosity, like a scientist observing an experiment. I could have created a scene. I could have demanded a chair, exposed their plan in front of the waitstaff, made the kind of public display that would live in family lore for generations. That's what they expected, what they had prepared for. Eleanor would comfort Sean over his unstable wife, and the divorce narrative would write itself. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and delivered the line that would begin my reclamation of power. "Seems I'm not family." 4 words. Simple. Devastating in their truth. The smiles faltered. Sean's expression shifted from smugness to uncertainty. I had departed from their script. "I'll see myself out," I added, turning away with the dignity that had been my armor throughout my marriage. "Anna, don't be dramatic," Sean called after me, another line from their playbook. "We can fix this." I didn't respond. I walked through the restaurant, nodding politely to the staff who had witnessed my humiliation. In the elevator I finally allowed myself a deep breath, then another. By the time I reached the street my hands had stopped shaking. A small cafe across from the restaurant offered the perfect vantage point. I ordered an espresso and pulled out my phone. This was the moment I'd prepared for. The 30 minutes of freedom while the Caldwells congratulated themselves on their successful ejection of the unsuitable wife. First, I sent a prepared email to Marco, the restaurant manager, with instructions that had been agreed upon as a surprise contingency, a common practice in high-level event planning. Attached was proof of my authority as the account holder and event coordinator, along with confirmation of immediate payment reversal. Next came the calls, to the vineyard scheduled for tomorrow's lunch, the private Vatican guide for the following day, the yacht captain for the Amalfi Coast excursion, the villa in Tuscany for the final weekend. One by one, I canceled everything, transferring the deposits I'd made with my own company's credit line back to my business account. With each cancellation, I felt lighter. The emails from Sean began arriving. First annoyed, then confused, then increasingly desperate as my tactics became clear. I ignored them all. 28 minutes after I had walked out of the restaurant, I finished my espresso and paid the bill. It was time for the final act. I stood, smoothed my Valentino gown, and walked back across the street to witness the moment when Eleanor Caldwell's perfect birthday celebration crumbled around her. I entered Aroma Restaurant through the service entrance, a route I had familiarized myself with during my earlier inspection. Marco, the restaurant manager, met me with a concerned expression. "Signora Caldwell, are you certain about this? It is most unusual." "I'm absolutely certain, Marco. And I appreciate your discretion." I handed him a sealed envelope. "This contains proof of the payment reversals and the cancellation of my company's guarantee for tonight's expenses. As we discussed, the Caldwells will need to provide a new method of payment to continue their dinner." Marco nodded solemnly. In the events world, relationships were everything. I had worked with Marco on 3 previous occasions for other Boston clients visiting Rome. He owed me favors, and while he might find my request peculiar, professional courtesy dictated he comply. "When should I inform them?" he asked. "I'll text you in exactly 5 minutes. I'd like to observe from somewhere discreet." He guided me to a small alcove near the kitchen entrance with a perfect view of the Caldwell table. They were in the middle of toasting Eleanor, champagne flutes raised high, faces glowing with self-satisfaction. The first course had just been served. The imported Ostra caviar that Eleanor had specifically requested. It had been almost too easy to dismantle Eleanor's birthday week. Most high-end vendors in the hospitality industry operate in a network of mutual trust and references. As the event planner who had made all the arrangements and whose company credit line secured the deposits, I had the authority to make changes. The digital trail of emails, contracts, and payment authorizations all bore my name and signature, not Eleanor's or Sean's. My phone vibrated. A new message from Sean. "Anna, where are you? Stop being childish and come back." Then another. "Mother is upset. You're embarrassing yourself." I didn't respond. Instead, I texted Carmen at the Villa Borghese where the family was scheduled to stay for the Tuscany leg of the trip. Carmen confirmed the cancellation and wished me well, adding that my substantial tip to her staff would be refunded separately to my business account. My phone vibrated again with messages from Sean, now arriving in rapid succession. "The hotel just called. They said our reservation for tomorrow night is cancelled. What are you doing? Anna, this is ridiculous. Call me immediately. This is not funny. Fix this now." I texted Marco, "You may proceed." From my hidden vantage point, I watched as Marco approached the table with 2 other staff members. He leaned down to speak quietly to Richard, who was seated at the head of the table opposite Eleanor. The family continued eating, initially paying little attention to the interruption. Richard's expression changed first, from polite interest to confusion, then alarm. He pulled out his wallet, speaking more animatedly to Marco. The manager shook his head apologetically, showing Richard something on a tablet. By now, the entire table had noticed the disruption. Eleanor set down her fork, her regal posture betraying the first hints of tension. Sean was staring at his phone, presumably reading my latest text explaining exactly what I had done. "All deposits have been returned to my company account. All arrangements for the week cancelled. Your family's financial issues are about to become very public. Enjoy your caviar." The scene unfolded like a perfectly choreographed ballet of chaos. Richard stood, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. Eleanor's hand flew to her diamond necklace, clutching it as if for support. Melissa was frantically whispering to her husband. Thomas pulled out his phone, presumably trying to verify what was happening. And Sean sat frozen, his face drained of color. Unlike the others, he understood the full implications. He knew what I had discovered about their finances. He knew what would happen if his mother's society friends learned that the Caldwells could no longer cover a dinner bill, let alone maintain their lavish lifestyle. My phone rang, Sean calling now, not texting. I declined the call and watched as he stood abruptly from the table, nearly knocking over his chair as he stepped away to try again. This time I answered. Anna, he hissed, his voice a mixture of fury and panic. What the hell do you think you're doing? Seems I'm not family, I repeated calmly. So I'm not responsible for family celebrations. You need to fix this right now. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for my mother? For all of us. I have exactly the idea, Sean. That was the point. Where are you? His voice changed, desperation creeping in. We need to talk. I can explain about Vanessa, about everything. I'm sure you can. The problem is I've seen the financial statements, Sean. I've seen the emails. I know the Caldwell empire is crumbling, and I know you've been hiding assets offshore before filing for divorce. His sharp intake of breath confirmed what I already knew. He never expected me to discover these things. He had underestimated me just as his family had from the beginning. Those were private. Yes, they were. Just like the text messages from Vanessa about the baby. Just like the script for announcing our divorce at your mother's birthday dinner. Just like the seating arrangement deliberately excluding me. Silence on the line. In the restaurant, I could see the manager now speaking to the entire table. Several other diners were watching with undisguised interest. The Caldwell's humiliation was becoming a public spectacle. Exactly what they had planned for me. Anna, please. Sean's voice had lost all its aristocratic confidence. You don't understand what this will do to us. I understand perfectly. That's why I did it. We can work this out. Come back to the hotel. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. No, Sean. I don't think we can work this out. I ended the call and stepped out from my hiding place. It was time for my final appearance as a Caldwell. As I approached the table, 12 pairs of eyes turned to me. Some angry, some fearful, all disbelieving. Eleanor spoke first, her voice shaking with fury. How dare you ruin my birthday? I smiled, feeling a strange sense of calm. I learned from the best, Eleanor. After all, isn't this exactly what you planned for me? A public humiliation? An orchestrated exit? The only difference is I changed the ending. Richard stood. This is outrageous. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted. Every contract, every reservation, every arrangement was in my name or my company's name. I simply adjusted the plans. You'll regret this, Melissa spat. When Sean divorces you, you'll get nothing. That's where you're wrong, I replied, looking directly at Sean. I have copies of everything, the offshore accounts, the hidden assets, the fraudulent business dealings. I'm sure the IRS will find it all fascinating reading. Their faces turned ghostly white as the implications sank in. In that moment I felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a profound sense of liberation as I turned and walked away from the Caldwell family for the last time. I left Italy the next morning, upgrading myself to first class on a direct flight to Boston using points I'd accumulated planning the Caldwell's previous vacations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Behind me I left a family in crisis, their carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. Through the hotel concierge, I learned that the Caldwells had paid for their dinner with Eleanor's vintage Bulgari bracelet as collateral until a wire transfer could be arranged. By morning, word had spread through Rome's high-end hospitality network that the illustrious American family was having payment difficulties. The remaining vendors I hadn't personally canceled began requesting upfront payments rather than promises. My phone was flooded with messages, some threatening, others pleading. I read them during my layover in London, sipping Earl Grey tea in the British Airways lounge. Richard, this is actionable. Our lawyers will be in touch. Melissa, you've made the biggest mistake of your life. Thomas, did you really think you could humiliate our family without consequences? Eleanor's message was the most revealing. I always knew you were common. This vindictive display only proves what I've said from the beginning. But it was the succession of messages from Sean that told the real story of a family in freefall. First, you have no idea what you've done. My father had a minor heart episode. Is that what you wanted? Then, the Prescotts and Whitmores saw everything. Do you know what this means for our standing? Later, the hotel is demanding payment for the entire week up front. They say all guarantees have been cancelled. And finally, please Anna, I need to talk to you. It's about more than us now. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded the financial documents I'd gathered to my lawyer with instructions to hold them securely until needed. If the Caldwells pursued litigation, I would be prepared. When I arrived home to our Beacon Hill brownstone, I hired a moving company to pack my personal belongings. I took only what was unquestionably mine: clothes, jewelry I'd purchased myself, my collection of first edition books, and the artwork I'd acquired before our marriage. Everything else, including the wedding gifts and items purchased jointly, I left behind. I wanted nothing that could tie me to the Caldwells' web of deceit. 2 days later, the Boston Globe published a small item in their society section: Caldwell Investment Group faces inquiry. The article mentioned financial irregularities and questions from investors. While it didn't make front-page news, it was enough to send ripples through Boston's social circles. Sean appeared at my new apartment unannounced 1 week after I returned from Rome. He looked haggard, the polished veneer of privilege replaced by genuine desperation. "You need to come home," he said when I opened the door. "This has gone far enough. This isn't a negotiating tactic, Sean. This is divorce." He stepped inside without invitation, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "The SEC is looking into father's accounts. 2 board members have resigned. Mother had to cancel her charity gala because 3 major donors pulled out." "That sounds like a Caldwell family problem," I replied. "Not mine." "It's your problem if I go down with the ship," he countered. "We're still married. My debts are your debts." I allowed myself a small smile. "Not when I have proof that you deliberately excluded me from financial decisions and hid assets with the intent to defraud me in divorce proceedings. My lawyer assures me that's enough to protect me." His facade cracked completely then. Sean sank onto my couch, head in his hands. "I never wanted it to be like this." "What did you want, Sean? To marry me for my event planning skills? To use me to manage your social calendar while you reconnected with Vanessa? To discard me when I was no longer useful?" "It wasn't like that in the beginning," he said quietly. "I did love you. But not enough to stand up to your family. Not enough to be honest about your affair." I sat across from him, feeling strangely calm. "When is the baby due?" His head snapped up. "How did you?" 4 months according to the texts I saw. "Congratulations." A heavy silence fell between us. Outside, rain began to tap against the windows of my new apartment. Smaller than our brownstone but mine alone, paid for with the proceeds from a business I'd built without Caldwell money or connections. "I'll give you whatever you want," Sean finally said. "Just hand over those documents and sign an NDA. Name your price." That was the moment I realized the Caldwells still didn't understand me at all. After 5 years, they still saw me as someone who could be bought, someone motivated by the same material concerns that drove their existence. "I don't want your money, Sean. I want my freedom. I want the truth acknowledged." I stood up, indicating our conversation was ending. "The documents stay with my lawyer unless you try to drag me down with you. The divorce terms are simple. I walk away with what's mine, you with what's yours." "And Vanessa? The baby?" His voice was barely audible. "That's between you and your conscience. I hope you'll be a better husband to her than you were to me." After he left, I stood by the window watching the rain intensify. The scandal unfolded gradually over the following weeks. The Boston Globe ran a more extensive piece on the Caldwell Investment Group's financial irregularities. Longtime clients quietly withdrew their portfolios. Eleanor's position on 3 prestigious charity boards became emeritus rather than active. Vanessa's pregnancy became public knowledge when she was spotted at her obstetrician's office wearing an engagement ring. The timeline made it clear that their relationship had resumed long before our marriage ended. In Boston's high society, infidelity might be tolerated if discreet, but such blatant misconduct violated the unspoken code. My business thrived despite, or perhaps because of, the scandal. Clients who had once looked down on me now appreciated my discretion and integrity. The story that circulated wasn't about a woman scorned but about a professional who refused to be used and discarded. 6 months later, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud when I opened it. A request to bid on planning Eleanor Caldwell's next charity event. Apparently, desperation had overcome pride. I declined politely, citing a full schedule. The divorce was finalized without drama. The Caldwells, focused on salvaging their reputation and finances, agreed to my terms without argument. Sean and Vanessa married quietly, their daughter born 2 weeks later. I sent no gift. On the 1-year anniversary of that night in Rome, I found myself planning another event in Italy. A celebrity wedding on the Amalfi Coast. As I stood on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean, phone in hand and vendors at my command, I realized something unexpected. I was happy. Not despite the collapse of my marriage but because of it. The Caldwells had tried to make me feel small, to reduce me to an accessory in their grand narrative. Instead, they had inadvertently freed me to reclaim my story. In losing what I thought I wanted, I had found what I actually needed. Not acceptance from a family determined to reject me, but the courage to reject a life built on appearances. I raised my glass to the setting sun, toasting the missing chair that had shown me exactly where I belonged.